Welcome back to Ms. Rollins' class.
This is equation of lines 10-2.
Okay. So hopefully we recognize y equals mx plus b. That is called our slope-intercept form. That is like the most basic equation on the line that you learned in Algebra 1. Today is a lot of just Algebra 1. We're actually doing like zero geometry today. But these are things that we need to know for geometry. So the strengths of, or let's talk about the slope-intercept form. Does anyone remember what the M stands for? Slope. And then does anybody remember B? It's from our Algebra 1 days.
Base.
Okay, I'll tell you what the definition of it is. It is the point where it crosses through the y-axis. Y-intercept. Okay, so that point where the line crosses through the y-axis. Okay, so the strength of this form, this is where we're going to easily find our slope or determine slope, which is represented by what letter? M. Just the M, not the X. The slope is just the number connected to X there. Okay, so we can easily pick out our slope, and this is also an easy way to graph a line. Okay, so first ones are a little bit confusing, or not really confusing, but just stick with me through the first one. So they give you the slope, but they didn't give us the y-intercept, right? We have point B, which is like an x and y value, but we don't have like the y-intercept. So we're missing B. I'm going to put B with a little question mark there. Okay, so to find that, everyone okay with like our slope is just -5? Yeah, that's just given to us. So to figure out what my b value is, I can take my y equals mx plus b and plug in the m, I can plug in my x, and I can plug in the y and just solve for b. Get everything else by itself. Okay, so I'm going to do that. So my y value here that they gave me is what? -12. My m value is
5.
-5. And my x value is 2. So they gave me everything except for b here. Okay, so we're just going to get b by itself. So what do I do first here? What do I do first? Or just multiply, right? -5 times 2 gives me -10. And last step to get b by itself, add 10. So -12 plus 10 leaves me with a b value of -2. So I have my m and I have the b. So my last step is to plug it back in, and it should be in y equals mx plus b form. So y equals my m, x, and then my b value is what? So -2. And that would be the final equation of the line. Okay, so we had to do a little bit of solving there, but are we okay with that? Okay, moving on to the next one. Did they give us the m or the b?
No.
They gave us neither, right? Here they at least gave us our slope, but here we're going to have to find our slope. Does anyone know how I would find slope with 2 points? It is the rise over run, but anyone remember our slope formula? Jordan? Jordan?
y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1.
Good. So those of you on that side of the room, there's a word wall over there if that's easier for you to see. Ours is 5th period, so we'll fill in the rest of the stuff today, but you should be okay with finding slope. So I'm going to pause here and let you guys find the slope, and then we'll keep going.
Welcome back.
Okay, so hopefully you found your slope to be -3. You can check with my steps there if you have any questions. And now we need to find the b. So we have the m. We now need to find b. So we're going to do the same thing that we did last time and plug into y equals mx plus b. So do you think it matters which point we use here?
No.
It doesn't matter, but is there one that looks a little bit easier to any of you?
Yes.
Which one?
101.
The second one, right? Because it has a 0. Zeros are always easier. Okay, so we're gonna plug in our x and y values. So y is -5. My m is what? My m is -3. My x is 0. So I plug in everything except for b and solve there. Okay, what happens when I multiply any number by 0?
Zero.
Good, turns to a 0, so I'm just going to cancel that out. So b will be equal to what? -5.
That's easy.
So there's my m, there's my b. I can now plug it back in. So y equals, someone help me out here.
Y equals -3x minus 5.
Very good, Wyatt. -3x minus 5. So we had to do a little bit of work there to find those values, but then we just plug them back in. Questions there?
No.
Okay, moving on to our graphs. Again, these are easy to read the graph and to graph the lines in y equals mx plus b form. So we want to pull out the m and pull out the b here. So how would we find a slope on a graph?
The rise and run.
The rise and run, very good. If I'm just looking at this graph and reading it right to left, is it going up or down? It's going up, so this would be a positive slope. I'm going to put a positive sign up above. So I should end up with a positive number here. It's good to just like think through that. So I'm going to start with the first point I come to, and I'm going to count up how many? 3. So positive 3, and I went to the right 1. So 3 over 1 I can just write as what? 3. So there's my slope. Okay, we said B stands for what to your right? B stands for, what did you say? Y-intercept. Y-intercept. So that is the point where the line crosses through the y-axis. So does anybody see that point? Raise your hand if you see that point. Mira? Oh, what is the point?
Oh, it cross. I don't know what it said. 2.
Yeah.
-2.
Very good. So it crosses through the y-axis at -2. Crosses through the y-axis at -2. So Alexis, can you help me set up my equation of a line? We have the m, we have the b, so let's plug it in. Y equals 3x minus 2. Very good. Okay, let's go ahead and do the next one. I'll give you a second to find your slope. When I'm looking at this, is this a negative slope or a positive slope?
Negative.
How do I know it's negative?
Because when you go left to right,
Left to
you
right.
go down.
It's going down, right? So it should be a negative number for my slope. So let's think about that. If I'm counting down, that's going to be my negative. So how many did I go down? How many did I count down? 5. Look at your graph and count down. So that should be a -5, and then we went to the right, so that should be a positive number in the x direction. So how many right? 7. So this is a -5 over 7. I'll give you a second to find where that line crosses through the y-axis. Where does that line cross through the y-axis? Jelani? I threw you on the spot. Where does the line cross through the y-axis?
5.
Okay. So I'll give you a second to write your equation of that line. Zach, did you get it? Other Zach, did you get it?
I got it.
What'd you get? Y equals, what's our slope? Sorry, I'm helping you. What's our slope? -5 over 7x, and then what would we do at the very end? should be pretty simple. Any questions with our y equals mx plus b?
No.
That is called the what form? The what form? Slope-intercept form. Good. Okay, moving on to point-slope form. This is at the bottom of your page. Go ahead and cross out those 2's. Okay, so cross out those 2's. This is our point-slope form, and I'll get someone to write it on your word wall in a little bit. But y minus y1. The important thing to know is that the y and the x are going to stay letters, so they're going to stay variables. So that will always stay an x and a y. These with the 1's are going to turn into numbers. And then what does m represent? Slope. Okay, so the strengths of this one is going to be, it's given to you on your EOC, so I'm going to put on the EOC. Reference sheet. And the other plus is that we use it to write equations of lines. Okay, so these are super easy if you just are given the slope and a point. I go ahead and label this my x1, y1, and then you just simply plug it in. So we're doing y minus y1, so what's my value for y1 here? What's my value where we wrote y1? 3. I write my slope in, which is what? Negative 9. And then in parentheses, x minus my x1 value. What's my x1 value? Negative 5. So make sure I'm writing minus a negative 5. What happens when we subtract the negative?
Turns into a positive.
Turns into a positive. Okay, our last step here, we do want to convert it back to y equals mx plus b. So what letter do we have to get by itself?
Y.
Y. So let's go ahead and do what to this side? What do we have to do to this side? Distribute. Very good. So let's distribute that negative 9.
So negative 9.
So what did this side turn into?
Negative 9x minus 40.
Minus 45. Very good. And what would be our last step to get y by itself? Add 3.
Minus 3. Oh, wait,
Add 3, right? So I'm adding 3 to that positive 45. So my final answer, I'm going to write it up here, would be y equals negative 9x minus what?
42.
Minus 42. Okay, so they're really, really easy if they're just giving you the slope and giving you the x1, y1. So I'm going to pause here and let you guys try the next one on your own. Notice that this is a 1/3, so we're going to be working with some fractions here. Actually, I'm going to go through this one with you because it was a little tricky. So I'm going to label x1, y1. x1, y1. Who can help me set up my equation or set up my form?
Y minus 1.
Good catch. So y minus a negative 1 equals 1/3 times what would be in my parentheses here? Darius? Darius? What would be in the parentheses there?
That'd be 4 minus 4. I mean, x minus 4.
Very good. X minus 4. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
So we have to distribute that 1/3. So what happens over here when I subtract a negative? So I have y plus 1 equals 1/3. And then, whoops, sorry, we're distributing that. So 1/3 x minus, we're working with fractions here, so how do we multiply fractions?
Don't we cross multiply by 1 and then divide by 3?
Multiply by 1 and divide by 3, that works. We're also just multiplying straight across. So 1 times a negative 4 leaves me with what? Negative 4 on top, and then 3 times a 1 on the bottom would leave me with a positive 3. So you are multiplying by the top, dividing by the bottom. So negative 4/3. And then last step, we have to subtract 1. Okay, you could plug this into your calculator, but we're going to make sure we're good with fractions, because fractions are fun. So right now we have y equals 1/3 x, and then we're gonna figure out what goes there. So we want to turn 1 into a fraction with the same denominator as 3. So we want these, I'll write this out to the side. When we subtract 1, does anyone know how we would make that into a fraction with the denominator as 3? 1 is represented in fraction form as a number over itself, correct?
Yeah.
So if I want it to be 3 on the bottom, what would it have to be on the top? 3. We want the number, like remember 1 in fraction form is a number over itself. 3 over 3, 4 over 4. I can also just take 1 over 1 and multiply the top and the bottom by 3. But we want the denominators to match when we're adding and subtracting. This is like back to like before algebra, just basic skills. So once the denominators match, all we have to do is combine the top. So what's -4 minus 3?
-1.
-4 minus 3.
7.
-7. -7/3. So my final answer
Oh, you said minus.
is 1/3 x minus 7/3. Always good to remember our basic skills. I know everybody loves fractions so much. I don't have another one. Okay, moving on to standard form. The only thing we do with standard form is convert it to y equals mx plus b. So we really don't have a ton of advantages of this, except for we can use it to find x and y intercepts. Find x and y intercepts. So think about an intercept is where that line is crossing through the x-axis or crossing through the y-axis. So we're going to figure out how to do that. Really easy to do that. To find the intercepts, you plug in 0. I plug in 0. Okay, so if we think about if I asked you what the y-intercept of that line is, what would you tell me?
3.
Positive 3. What is the x value? I know the y value is 3, but what's the x value there? 0. So that's why we're plugging in 0 to these equations. We can figure out where our y-intercept is if we plug in 0 for x. So let's go ahead and plug in 0 for x first. So let's plug in 0 for x first. So we're going to do 8 times 0, and we're going to leave everything else the same. Okay, we're plugging in 0 for y to find the x-intercept. Or sorry, I said that backwards. X to find the y-intercept. What happens here with 8 times 0?
Turn to 0.
Just a 0. So I'm left with -1y equals 24. So my y value will be equal to what?
Negative
24. I divide by -1, right? So y equals -24. Okay, we're going to do the same thing. Let me write that over here. We're going to do the same thing for x. So I'm now going to plug it in for what variable? We already plugged it in for x. We're now going to plug it in for y. So now we're going to plug in 0 for y. So wherever I see y, I'm now going to plug in 0. What happens to -1 times 0?
0.
Just 0, so I'm left with 8x equals 24. So what would be my last step there?
Divide by 8.
Divide by 8, so x equals 3. Okay, I'll pause here and let you guys find the x and y intercepts for the next one. Okay, so double check your y and x intercepts there, but again, those are easy skills. We're just plugging in 0. Okay, our next one says to find the what?
Slope.
Slope. This is in standard form right now, so we can't easily find the slope. What form do you think we have to get it into? Close. Slope intercept. We're going to conjoin your two answers into one. We need to convert this to slope intercept. What is our slope intercept form? What is the slope-intercept form?
Y equal mx plus b.
Okay, so I'm going to move everything over and get y by itself here. So I'm going to subtract the what over? What do I need to move?
4x.
The 4x. So I'm going to subtract 4x. So I get negative 2y equals, if we want this in mx plus b, which one should we put first? The 4x or the 8?
4x.
Negative 4x plus 8. Okay, what's the last step to get y by itself?
Divide by negative 2.
Divide everything by negative 2. Okay, so we get y equals, what's negative 4 divided by negative 2?
Positive 2.
Positive 2x. And then what's 8 divided by negative 2?
Negative
Negative 4. Okay, so that is my equation, but what did the question ask me to do?
Find
the slope.
Find the slope. Should we find the slope now?
2.
2. So once we get it into slope-intercept form, it's super easy just to find the slope, the number attached to x. Okay, so go ahead and try our next one. This needs to be a 16. It got cut off. So go ahead and try that next one.
Shut up.
Okay, what's my first step here?
Put the 10 on the other side.
Yes. Subtract the 10x. Why can I not combine those two?
One has x, the other one doesn't.
Good, they're not like terms. Okay, and then we're dividing everything by what?
Negative 4.
Negative 4. Do we see something that might be a little different?
I can't.
Does 10 go into 4 easily, or 4 go into 10? No. We're going to keep it in fraction form, so we're not going to do decimals. But I have a negative over a negative, which is a positive over positive. And then a 10 over 4, I'm going to write that down. 10 over 4x, and then 16 divided by negative 4 would be
Negative 4.
negative 4. So what can we take out of a 10 and a 4? 2. 2. My GCF is 2. So I'm going to divide the top and the bottom by 2. So y equals
5 over 2.
5 over 2 x minus
Okay, so what is the slope of this line? 5 over 2. Is that a positive slope or a negative slope?
Positive slope.
Positive slope. Okay, and we're moving on. Any questions there before we move?
What is this?
There's your joke for the day. Okay,
What did Mama Kyle say to the baby cow?
Why did
Pastor Bennett.
oh!
That was funny, dude.
Those are birds. You make fun.
That's so funny.
He likes puns. Okay, parallel lines. Anybody who was here Wednesday, does anyone know the answer to this? Parallel lines have the shortest, same, or equal slopes. Very good. You should get bonus points for that. Same slopes. So if my first slope is 1/2, what would my other line have to have a slope of?
1/2.
1/2. So let's look at our equations. Our first one is nice and easy. That's already in the correct form. So what is the slope of my first line?
1.
Positive 1. We have two separate lines here. Everyone see that? That's a, oh, thank you, good catch. That's a negative 1. Thank you. You're right. Okay, our next one is y by itself. Is this already in y equals mx plus b form? No, it is not. So we have to get it into that form. So what do we have to do?
Mine is
Divide everything by negative 3. So y equals, what's 3 divided by negative 3?
1.
dog.
3 divided by negative 3 is
Negative 1.
negative 1x. And do we care about the y-intercept here?
No.
I only care about the slope. So what's my slope? Are these the same slope?
C. No. Yes.
Are these the same slope?
Yes.
Yes, so these are parallel.
Wow.
Okay, let's look at the next one. Did they make it easy on us?
No.
No, they did not. So we're gonna have to get y by itself here. We have to get y by itself. So we're gonna subtract the what over?
3.
The 3x. I'm gonna come down here and rewrite it. So I have 5y equals negative 3x plus 15. Are we okay with that? Did I write that wrong? 5y?
You got it, you got it.
I'm doing the first one.
How you do this?
Welcome back.
Okay, anybody remember perpendicular lines from Wednesday? That would only be people that were there for the session, but perpendicular lines have, there's 2 words. One of them means you flip it. Anybody remember these words? Opposite, reciprocal.
Well, yeah.
Opposite reciprocal slope. So if I gave you like an original slope of 1/2, opposite means opposite sign. So if it is a positive 1/2, it would be a negative. And then reciprocal means I flip it, so it would be a negative 2 over 1. Do I have to write the 2 on the bottom? No. So a negative 2. So those are examples of perpendicular slopes. What's the symbol for perpendicular? Upside down T. Anybody remember what that means when 2 lines are perpendicular? 90 degrees. Very good. They intersect at 90. Okay, so let's look at the first one. What is the slope of my first line? Negative 1. What is the slope of my second line? If it's not, yeah, just an invisible 1, right? Okay, so let's think about the signs. Have they been changed?
Yes.
Yes? Has it been flipped?
Yeah.
Yeah, a 1 over 1 is just a 1 over a 1, right? So these would be
perpendicular.
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 Okay, let's look at our next one. Did they make it easy on us? No. But we've done these before, right? Or we did the first one. So look back at your parallel and find your slope for the first line. We already did it, so we don't want to do more work than we have to. The first line was negative 3 over 5.
Oh yeah.
Okay, this one is different. So we're gonna have to do this one. So let's move the x over. So it's gonna become a what on the other side? If it's a negative 5x, it's gonna be a positive 5x on this side. And what are we dividing everything by? 3. Okay, all I'm concerned about is the slope. So what is the slope of this line? Positive 5 over 3. So did the signs change? Yeah. Has it been flipped? Yes. So these are perpendicular. Okay. Sorry.
Slow the boat.
Have you got a boat?
Okay, I'll let you do the last one.
Let's do it.
Okay, so these are not perpendicular because they were not flipped. Negative 3 over 1 should have been a positive 1 over 3. So not perpendicular. Okay, our last 4 questions should go pretty quick. But we need to remember the point slope form for this. Does anybody remember that from the beginning of our lesson? Y minus. Look back in your notes. Y minus Y1 equals M times X minus X1. I'll get someone to write that on the word wall if you don't mind. Alexis, you can write it on the 5th period over there. But go ahead and write that down above those 4 problems because we'll need that equation here. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the first one. What is the equation of a parallel line? Do we think that word parallel is important here?
Yes.
Yes. Let's circle that. What do I know about parallel slopes?
They're same.
They're the same, right? So if this is my original line, what is the slope here?
7. -7.
-7. So my new parallel line, parallel slope, would also be -7. Y minus Y1 equals M, and then in parentheses X minus X1, and that's the point slope form. Okay, so we have our slope, we have our x1, y1, so the only thing to do now is to plug it in to our point slope form. So I'll do this one with you. We have y minus, what is my y1? 3. Equals, what's my slope?
Negative 7.
Negative 7, and then in parentheses x minus 1. And then remember our last step was to convert it back to y equals mx plus b. So we have to distribute. So this side becomes negative 7x plus 7. We bring down our y minus 3, and what's my last step?
Subtract. Add 3.
Add the 3. So my final equation will be y equals negative 7x, what?
Plus 10.
Plus 10. Okay, so keywords to pull out are perpendicular or parallel. So if it's parallel, we use the same slope. Let's look at our next one. This says write an equation that is perpendicular. What is perpendicular slopes?
Intersect that 90.
That's the definition of perpendicular, but what do we do? They are, look back at that vocab word at the top of your page. They are opposite reciprocals, which means I take my original slope of 1/4 and I do what to it? I flip it and change the sign. So a positive 1/4 would be a
4/1.
negative 4/1. Do I have to write the 1?
No.
No. So this is the slope that I want to use. So that one has one extra step of converting your slope. Anyone need me to go over that again?
No.
Yes? Okay. So my original slope, you know where I got the 1/4 from? So if they are perpendicular, my new slope will be the opposite reciprocal. So I flipped this to 4/1 and I changed it from a positive to a negative. So we want to use -4, we're ignoring the 1/4 now. So we do the same thing, there's my x1, there's my y1. We do the same exact process. So this would be y minus what? 4 equals, what's my slope? -4, and in parentheses x minus
-12.
-12. When I subtract a negative, what happens?
It's positive.
Turns to a positive. And what do we do now? Distribute. Zach, you with me? So let's distribute -4x, and then what's -4 times the positive 12? -48. I'm going to bring down my y minus 4, and what's my last step? Add the 4. So final answer is y equals -4x. You tell me.
Minus 44.
We have a -48 plus 4. So they're different signs, which means we subtract and keep it the negative. So -44. If they're different signs, you subtract. Questions there before I pause? Okay, I'm gonna give you, I don't know, like 5 or so minutes to work through these last two. I'm gonna come back on here and have like the wrong answers up here, and I want you to tell me or see if you can figure out what I did wrong. So I'll give you a second to work through the next two. Use those that we just did as examples. Those are our last two for notes. Okay, does anybody already see my mistake here? I made a mistake in the first step of this problem. Summer, you want to go for it? The -2 and the -3. So I did that right. Y minus y1. I got the x1 and the y1 values wrong. Anyone else see a mistake that I might have done?
You might have done.
Jelani?
It's not positive.
The 6 has to be positive. Nope, I do x minus x1, so that's correct. Wyatt?
You're supposed to flip the M and then switch the sign.
Good. So we know that this perpendicular should be flipped and the sign should be changed. What's the only thing we did here?
Flip.
We just switched the sign. Did we flip a 3 over what? What's a 3 over?
1.
3 is over 1, so this should have been a what?
Sorry, I moved this room.
Negative 1 over 3. Negative 1 over 3. So I'm going to go through and finish this problem with you, so go through it with me if maybe you did it wrong. Okay, we have to distribute that negative 1/3. So I have y minus 2 equals negative 1/3 x, and we're going to multiply these straight across. So what is negative 1? I'm going to change that to a negative 1 times a negative 6. What is negative 1 times negative 6?
Positive 6.
The denominator is 3 times 1, which is a positive 3. What's 6 divided by 3?
2.
Positive 2. What's the last step here?
Add 2.
Add 2. So my final answer would be y equals negative 1/3 x plus 4. Negative 1/3 x plus 4. Any last questions before
No, ma'am.
we stop? Okay, that's the end of our notes for today.